It's the courage to tell the truth, even if it's not in your best interest too. It's the courage to be honest with yourself and not lie to yourself. It's the courage to try something you haven't tried before, to date somebody you haven't dated, to whatever it is. And it's the courage to speak up.
Welcome everyone to another wonderful day and another wonderful podcast with a smart looking gentleman I have in front of me now. Mr. Dave Farrow. Yes, you, Dave. I know you're looking left and right, but yeah, you are looking smart. Smarter than me at the moment, which is quite unusual, but I like it. So Dave is here with us today. As always, I do not have a clue what he does and his backstory. I don't have a clue. So what we're going to do, listeners, as we always do, we'll just go with the flow and just see how it goes. Dave, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing good. You put your guest in the uncomfortable position of bragging. You know, we're not supposed to do that in society, right? So to talk about ourselves, but I suppose it makes for a fun.
I don't know about bragging, but it's the way we always go is to start a conversation from the fresh. So let's find out what you're all about, and then we'll take it from there.
Shoot.
So what do you do as a job, and how do you help people in your successful business?
Well, I don't really think of myself as having a job. I have a few businesses. My main claim to fame is that I'm in the Guinness Book of Records for my memory. But I was diagnosed ADHD and dyslexic, as well as a slow learner and another disability when I was a child. I'm 14. That's a child to a lot of people. So I went from that diagnosis to being obsessed with trying to figure out how to run my brain. I came up with a few innovations, different ways to study and learn and trigger focus and things like that. And that turned into a course and a few books and then lectures, and my career grew from there. I had a best-selling book. I was in the New York Times. I was in the Today Show, things like that. A few TV shows and pictures behind me and stuff. But most of all, I think I helped a lot of people. There were a lot of people like me that, whether they had a formal diagnosis or they were just falling behind, they didn't know how to run their brain when it came to studying and learning. And so that became my career. And then about 8-9 years ago, I started a different career because I was so good at marketing. My first career, I was so good at getting on television and stuff. I've been on over 2,000 shows, sold a lot of products. Then other entrepreneurs came up to me and asked me, how did you do that? Can I get on a TV show? Things like that. So I started teaching them how, and then I became frustrated with that because I'm not the best coach. I just decided to just do it for them. So I started a company called Farrow Communications. It's what's the logo above me. And we do PR and marketing for entrepreneurs and authors and businesses, things like that. So I have this PR agency that is my main business. And I still lecture and teach and write books on memory and the brain. And I've got a couple of other interesting things that my ADD has brought me to. I got into inventing. I got into nanotechnology in the early 2000s. I ran a biotech company in 2006. So I've had a bunch of adventures, and now I'm looking at a couple more coming up that we'll probably talk about.
My God, Dave. Do you know what? I'm trying to catch up with you at the moment with all the things that you have done. So, as you've been very successful in more ways than one, let's go further back. We already know the memory side of it. You've put a system in place to help you with that and to help many other people. So let's go before that started off with you having a great system for memory. Let's go back when you was a child, when your memory or had issues with studying, keeping information in binding. How did that affect you? Just give me a typical week in how things were very difficult when you couldn't quite comprehend with information.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's like a lot of people, like a lot of people with ADD. That probably was what affected me the most, which is odd because it seems like everybody's ADD these days, so it's a label that's thrown around a lot. But I think there's a spectrum, and if there's a spectrum, I'm very severely on my ADD affects me a lot. The other diagnoses I had maybe I think affect me very fairly little. I'm not very dyslexic. I'm a little bit dyslexic, things like that. But the ADD, it really was very difficult for me to focus on any task, to do any task for more than a couple of minutes, and it was very frustrating because willpower and desire meant nothing. Now it is true to be said that an ADD person can, if they're passionate about something, they do hyper focus, and that in that sense, that is a very real thing, and that's actually the mechanism that I chose to develop, and I developed a bunch of focus techniques around it. So I kind of gamified studying and turned it into a really cool strategy. And this was in the early '90s, so there wasn't really anything like that at the time, and it was very successful. But the situation where you want to perform and you want to remember something, and then you just blank out, or you get distracted by something and focus on something else, it was daily. I was the person who was out of it. And then when I started applying some techniques, then I found the other side to ADD, which was that ability to turn on that intense focus. And then over time, you come up with coping mechanisms, using like a calendar and to-do lists and getting organized and things like that, so that it doesn't affect you in a negative way as much. You can keep track of things in a way that a lot of neurotypical people can keep track of, but they'll just do it naturally, and you have to have like a system in place. So sometimes it takes you some time to find these systems that work for you and to build them. So yeah, I think that was the big arc, was how much of a struggle it was, and it was just so frustrating because it seemed things that other people took for granted that were very easy for them were very, very difficult for me to grasp and to learn and to do.
Okay, and so when it comes to grasping things, I take it when you was younger, you had a natural ability to see certain patterns, a certain way of doing things that others couldn't see. So as much as you found it difficult doing the typical thing within school, there were other things that you are natural at doing. Or am I wrong in that case?
I would say the only thing that really saved me was I have a very natural optimism. I looked at it like I could not look at my grades or results. I was in the bottom of most of my classes, and when I say the bottom, I was like the lowest percentile of anyone. I wasn't in the bottom third or something. I was the last man in a lot of these classes, and I was just struggling. And my home life, didn't really help. My parents never went to college. My dad was a factory worker. My mom was a homemaker. There was no real discussion around the kitchen table about homework or anything like that. I just basically had to figure it out myself. And I was just a kid. So I would say I found my gifts later on, but what I focused on at the time was if I was better than I was before, if I had improved, that got me very excited. So if I went from I don't know, being able to focus on something and memorizing something for like 2 minutes, if I went to like 2.5, that was a huge jump. That was a great improvement for me. If I compared myself to other people who could study for hours at a time, I was terrible. But I compared myself to my past performance, and I saw a gradual improvement as I figured things out. And I'm so thankful. If I have any natural gift, it was that optimism, because that excited me, that got me going. Whereas so many other people would have been depressed because they're like, oh, look how far I have to go, right? But so I remember one time I did a push-up challenge because I was a kid, I was a boy, I wanted to work out. So I would do a push-up challenge, and I would add a push-up every day. And I got up to 120 push-ups after like few months, right? As every day I was doing 120 push-ups, and I was like in fantastic shape. And I kind of took that same philosophy. Now I stopped that after a while. I don't do 120 push-ups every day today. Don't get me wrong. But I try to stay in shape. But I kept that attitude where as long as I just add one each day, as long as today I do a little bit better than the day before, or I figure something out a little bit more, as long as I'm not backtracking, then I guess I believed in the law of compound interest, and I just would get better and better and better and better and better. Whereas where I saw everybody else's, they were very talented. They had a lot of natural talent, but they weren't improving. They were just applying that talent to whatever they were studying and learning, but they weren't trying to read faster every day. They weren't trying to comprehend things faster. They weren't trying to expand the vocabulary more. They weren't trying to memorize facts and learn new information. You know what I mean? So like that was really, it was that Kaizen approach, the Japanese principle of just daily improvement, that gave me faith that I could project in my mind a certain number of months or years out where I would be where I want to be. And as long as I had that, then I kept working.
So you've always, as a child, always liked a challenge. So when you got your teeth into something, you'd always use that challenge to keep you spurring forward. Or did that come later on as you got older, before you started to take on, I've got to have a challenge, I've got this focus every day at a time? Or was you always wired like that? Were you influenced by someone when you were younger, for instance? Did you have a grandfather that actually pushed you in that direction? What gave you that drive to have that challenge and to focus as from process to process?
Well, for the longest time, I hid this. I didn't talk about my ADD. When I was first talking about my memory courses, I actually was ashamed. So I tried to hide that. And my sales were not that great as a result. There were some people who were like, oh, they're impressed. You're a Guinness record holder. Great. And they buy my course. Once I started talking about how I struggled and how I had ADD and the struggles that I had with it, then sales went through the roof. So I learned very quickly that you have to be vulnerable with that. So recently I expanded that in my latest book, Brain Hacker. It's right up here. It's available on Amazon. I did actually, it is somewhat of a memoir where I go into what motivated me in the beginning. So for the longest time, I didn't talk about this, but when I was very, very young, I was very sick. So when I was born, I was hospitalized for almost the first year. The first 11 months, I was still in the hospital until I was brought home. And then I was in and out of the hospital for years until I was at least 8 or 9. I had to deal with tremendous pain. That was the biggest thing. I was on codeine, and then eventually they took away the codeine because they were afraid I was going to get addicted. So I was dealing with chronic pain at that age, and I would have just horrible inflammation and pain and everything. And I had the experience of knowing what it was like to feel like you're on death's door when you're born, right? Which is an experience I've never met anybody else who has that experience. But so I was a kid looking at mortality. I was just getting started looking at mortality when everyone else thinks they're immortal. And I'd wake up with aches and pains like I'm 90 years old, and like in shrieking pain trying to deal with things. So I think it was that initial challenge that I tried to get in shape and get healthy and eat better, and I did a bunch of things to try to overcome that. But I had that for a long time. But I think it was that initial challenge that I often say to people that I was very traumatized, but I didn't have a bad guy. Nobody did that to me. It was my body doing it to me. So there was no anger. There was trauma, to be sure. I felt horrible pain. I passed out from pain sometimes, but there was nobody doing it to me. It was my body doing it to me. So I became I just felt very lucky that I was alive a lot of times, and I wanted to make the most out of this life. And the fact that I couldn't focus as well as the person next to me, it seemed like a minor thing compared to what I'd been through before, So I think that early experience of of medical problems gave me a completely different perspective. When everyone else was treating their body like crap and whatever, I was so thankful to be alive, and I was grateful, and I wanted to make the most out of it. You know?
Totally. And this is why I try to delve more into the question of where that came from, because usually when someone's got a huge amount of drive in a particular way, it's got to come from some sort of pain, a life skill. And because you had a threshold of chaos so high, when anything else was thrown in front of you, be it at school, it was nothing. You've had to face death's corner on a weekly basis and suffering. So school was nothing, maybe being bullied was nothing compared to what you went through, hence why your strength and your resilience.
Well, I think there's also something to be said for the good old-fashioned ADD risk-taking too, because there's definitely a choice. And it's interesting, you are right. I do like your process where you're bringing this out in me, because I wouldn't normally talk about this. I wouldn't think that people are interested, really. Like I am very interested in it because it's my life, but I don't know if other people are interested in these things. But if you say you are, then I'll believe you and keep going. But that risk taking, they say that people who have near-death experiences, which I did when I was very young, they say that they go in two different directions. They either become daredevils, where they have no fear and they go for things, or they become incredibly timid and afraid all the time. And I definitely went into the daredevil direction. So I think I took a lot more chances. I tried things that other people weren't willing to try and put the effort and time into. I found mnemonics and mastered that. I found speed reading and a bunch of other stuff, and I continue to learn to this day. But that was really it. It was trying new things, not thinking you know it all already just because you tried something once and it didn't work. Going back to it, maybe your first experience is wrong. Not making assumptions is really I think the solution. I think the world is open to just about anybody who is somewhat healthy, and I have to put health in there because you need that. I know that, but it is somewhat healthy and is able to get around and mobile and things like that. But the world is your oyster if you are able to really try to look at it the way it really is, not the way you want it to be, but the way it really is. Be willing to make mistakes and try again, and be willing to just believe that you don't know everything and keep on learning. And if you keep that sort of intellectual humility, where it's just, you're not 100% sure. Yeah, you tried something. Maybe you tried investments, or you tried running a business, or you tried, going on dates or something, and you had a bad experience, right? So many people I find it crazy how quickly they are to give up. And I had to try 5 times to get out of bed sometimes when I was a kid, to get my body going, and to give up. I don't even know what that means, right? That doesn't even make sense to me,
No, I hear you. I mean, the problem is that there are people out there that's had a silver spoon given to them. So when you haven't understood about being broke, when you haven't understood about being ill, not being able to get to the right education, etc., so your perception is completely different. So your threshold with dealing things in life and being able to get through the processes to your goals is difficult. While you and other people I know who are great leaders, you are only, in my point of view, can be a great leader when you've gone through great pain, and it's different forms of pain. Hence why I already know you have a great backstory, and you've gone through great pain. I didn't know what it was because you're very successful. And the reason why I do this, Dave, because you was quite surprised when we had the conversation before we came on, and I said, I don't have a clue what you do, blah, 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 blah. The reason why I have this podcast is to show people it doesn't matter where you're coming from, whether you can't hardly move your muscles. whether you've got a bad memory, etc., you can always achieve regardless once you keep on trying and being consistent. And even when we are successful, like you still have rough days, you still have tough days, you have your ups and you have your downs.
Yeah, no, I just got out of a few years of very rough times. COVID nearly destroyed my core business, and I nearly went. I'm not afraid to say I spent every dollar I could sometimes just to keep payroll going, so I didn't have to fire people. And I was there's times where I've had panic attacks and everything. Like I'm not this stoic perfect person. I'm still a work in progress. But you're absolutely right that there is this tenacity that I think is lacking in a lot. I don't know about being born with a silver spoon. I got into being an entrepreneur because I had so many struggles academically. I didn't really gel in academia. So I thought that the only way I could have a really successful path is if I carved it out myself. I really didn't trust the school system or the academic system to be a good pathway to have a decent career. So I just decided to go out and start a business and figure it out. And I know it sounds weird, but it's just that seemed to be the safer path to me. I don't need to compete against 10,000 people with the same education. I just need to convince one customer to give me their money and trust me with a job. And if I do a good job on that, maybe they'll give me money again, right? And that seemed a lot safer bet to me than some of the career paths that my colleagues were taking, my other students were taking. Now, it is really important to have a big, hairy, audacious goal too, and that's when I really saw the crab bucket try to pull me down. Like when I decided to go for a Guinness record, I had so many people trying to stop me, and it just confused me. I was like, okay, it's great that you have an opinion that, okay, you think it's kind of risky that I'm doing this, but why are you trying to stop me? I talk about this in my book. I had family members bet money that I would fail. They bet
Really?
money. Yeah, they placed a bet with me that I would fail at my Guinness record. Now, the other thing is it's a freaking Guinness record. It's a tough thing to do. So I didn't succeed the first time, but I don't quit, right? So I went out there. And by the way, this was I held down a basic minimum wage job that my ADD brain could barely keep track of and things like that. So I didn't have any sort of funds or anything. I had to get somebody to give me a lift to the location where I was going for this Guinness record, and I was just like 21 at the time. So I had nothing. I never had any money. No one gave me any money. I went into debt to start my business and built from there. But that Guinness record was probably the best lesson on other people that I've ever had, because I went for it and I had I won't get into like specific family members or anything, but there was very, very few people who actually thought it was a good idea to even try. And for some reason, they were so bothered by how I could be embarrassed if I failed. And I'm like, how is that even embarrassing? Like if I talked to a friend who tried to get a Guinness record, I'd still think that was a cool story. You know what I mean? Like it's not anything to be embarrassed about, but they were so afraid to put themselves out there. And I was so afraid not to put myself out there. I was so afraid to be forgotten, to be just another Joe. So anyways, I failed the first time. So they won the bet, but I went back to them and I asked them to do double or nothing, because when I went back, I succeeded, and they still owe me $40.
With interest.
Yeah, with interest. There you go. Yeah, if I would have put that in the Bitcoin, I would have been right now. So if you try something like this, I think people see me right now and like, oh, this guy doesn't have any problems. But it was like the problems never end until they all end, right? The problems never end until you get to a point where you have your finances together, and your health and your body is not fighting you all the time, and you've got your relationships in order, and then life can be wonderful. But so that lesson, that constant and never ending improvement, that Kaizen, is still still what I point to today. I have a son who's 10 years old now, and it's the one thing I want to instill in him is to not focus so much where he is right now, but just try to be better every day, and focus on that. Compare yourself to your past self, and don't compare yourself to anybody else, because you've got to be an original. You've got to be unique.
Totally. I totally agree with you, especially with this whole AI situation. Everybody's clamping onto that, but that's for another conversation another day. I want to speak to the slightly older Dave at 21 who was hiding himself because he was ashamed of certain things about himself. But how did it come about that he thought he was good enough to go for a world record? And what specifically was that world record about? And why did you think you could do that?
Well, wow, you really are going chronologically. All right. So when I broke the record, that was one of the final stepping stones in a bunch of steps. So I started learning memory techniques and developed some focus techniques. And I even came up with my first technique, my first invention when I was 16 years old. And it was a different way to link numbers together. So I ended up being accredited with about 5 different techniques that I developed, including a focus technique. And I'm very thankful, actually, my modality, memory modes, has actually been tested in a double-blind neuroscience study in McGill University and been shown to be very successful. So when people follow my particular memory system, they actually get about 3 times the results, according to this study, than just learning mnemonics on their own. So if anybody has learned memory techniques or the art of memory, you might be surprised there is a place to go even higher. So, when I was breaking that record, that was after I had already memorized the order of 6 decks of cards for a charity, and I tried to boost that up to 15 decks of cards. Basically, memorizing a deck of cards is one of the simplest ways to test your memory, because it's random numbers and symbols. It can be all shuffled together. There's no way to. I suppose there's a way to cheat at it, but it's fairly straightforward. It's in front of you. You go through the cards and then you recite them. So I had this fun thing where after I had learned some memory techniques and they were really doing well for me, other students went up to me and said, "Hey, how did you do that?" So I started teaching them, and it actually one of my teachers turned the debating club into a memory club. And for lunch hour, for a good half of the year, I was teaching people one day per week. I was teaching people how to do memory techniques, and it was really a great experience because I was learning this stuff, improving, coming up with new techniques. Then I was testing it out on the other students, and they were seeing results too. So I decided, hey, let's do something really cool with it. There's this technique to memorize playing cards. I had come up with a code that allowed me to memorize basically 5 cards as one image. And so I wanted to test this. So I went after a charitable thing for the United Way. I memorized 6 decks of cards, and I didn't get it accurate enough to get any sort of record, but we did raise like $4,000 for charity. Wow. And that was, so I was around, I want to say 18, around there. Yeah. So the memory guy doesn't remember. It was a long time ago. So after I got that, I was like, well, how far can we go? And I looked at Guinness records, and there was this guy who had memorized, I thought it was like 20 decks of cards. Turns out I had an old copy of the Guinness Book of Records. So I was practicing for 20 decks of cards, and then somebody brought me a newer copy, and it was 40 decks of cards. Yeah, and I was like, what the heck am I going to do, right? But I had to do it. I had to do it. So so what I did was, and I can show you right up here. It's these are the two these are the playing cards themselves, and the 2 Guinness record certificates. So the first record that I went for was 52 decks of cards, as many decks of cards as there are cards in a deck. I thought that was kind of cool. But it was a progression. So at first I learned the technique. I went, I did a charitable thing and got some television and exposure, and then moved up from there and trained and practiced. When I was 21, I was able to to go for that record. That's 2,704 cards, all shuffled together, and I recited them from memory. And then years went by. I was doing the memory thing. I was doing my memory business, and the record was broken. And now the person who broke the record, Dominic O'Brien from England, he's a very good friend of mine. He's a great memory expert in his own right. I had to take that record back though, because I knew I could do so much more. And I broke it with 59 decks of cards and only one mistake. And that is the record that still stands to this day.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. And again, being resilient, taking each day at a time. That's absolutely crazy.
It is interesting when you really dedicate yourself to just trying something bigger. And if you accomplish something, what next goal could I make that's even bigger and even bigger and even bigger? Because there was a progression for me. But to a lot of the people that I talked to who hadn't seen me memorize 6 decks of cards, or hadn't seen me, teach a memory class in high school, right? Like they didn't see this side of me, so it seemed to be coming out of the blue for them. And
I'll tell you what. Now you've told me basically what had happened. I totally understand why your family betted against you, because, as you said, if they didn't see that side of you, who would think you could do it, right? So it's understandable. I get it. I think we can forgive the family betting against you this one time.
Yeah, and everybody, I think everybody can relate to that, because if you're trying something that is really, really ambitious, then you're going to fail. You're going to have ups and downs, but other people are living their lives. Not everybody's going to notice your journey, and you could be ready for something very powerful, and nobody else notices until it gets above their radar. I was saying to my team, actually, because we were getting out of this slump from COVID, and now business is humming quite well. I'm very happy about that. And we're looking towards like investing and things like that. But I was saying that success is very much like there's an old metaphor about a bamboo plant, that it takes 7 years for the base of the bamboo plant to become mature, and then the stalks start growing, and every 6 months you get like 6 feet of these bamboo stalks, something like that. I don't know the exact. Somebody in the comments tell me where I'm wrong on that, but basically the idea is that improvement is made a little bit at a time, and then success comes all at once. And that is very true.
It's about the consistency, isn't it? It always comes round to that consistency, focus, and the drive.
And I will tell you that I don't consider myself the most consistent person. If you were to know me, I have huge ups and downs, but maybe I am consistent when you look at me like over the course of the year, right? So if you have bad days, then just have bad days. Don't be so down on yourself. You to be consistent. I consider myself the least consistent person of anybody that I know, because my ADD is still real. I didn't wave a magic wand and it goes away. I have huge swings up and down, but consistently I wake up every day trying to be better, and consistently every day I put effort towards my work and try to be the best person I can be, and try to learn and grow. So yeah, that kind of consistency really does pay off. Yeah.
Okay, let's quickly talk about the consistency side of things, because usually people say consistency is the key, consistency is the key, consistency is the key. So let's drill down further into that. So you're saying because of the issues you had, you weren't consistent on a daily basis, but overall, you still had your goals, mini goals, and you were consistent in that fact. Or am I wrong? I would agree with you. The only thing is that the only thing I'm equivocating here is just that, like take for example social media. I stayed off of social media for a long time. I did a few YouTube videos, then I stopped that. I see myself sometimes I haven't been. If I was posting a video every week for the last 4 years, I'd have many more. Like there is a level of consistency, a day in, day out, that I wasn't doing, that I don't think is my skill set. I have big peaks and valleys throughout the week, but consistently, you're right. I guess what I'm trying to say, if I'm trying to talk to like my younger self or other people who were younger there,
is don't get too hard on yourself if you're not what you think is consistent. You know, when people say you have to be consistent, like the issues that I had huge psychological swings. I would get very depressed. I'd get very manic. Chronic pain is a tough thing too, because you have good days and bad days, and on your good days you try to make up for your bad days, and often you'll try to for yourself. So I was very athletic. I was a boxer at one point and things like that, and then other days I would have a week where I'd be in pain and I wouldn't be able to go to the gym, so I'd lose all my gains. So from other people's perspective, I don't think they saw me as very consistent, although I was trying really hard. I think you can pick your consistency though. If you can consistently stay optimistic and learn from your mistakes and keep trying, despite your failures or setbacks, that I think is maybe the most important consistency. And everything else, rhythm will take care of.
I get that. Find your strength and be consistent with that.
Yeah, I just didn't want to say, like, sit here and say, oh yeah, I've got this all figured out and I'm perfect and I don't have, I've got downs and moods and everything. I'm not as consistent as I would like to be. So don't get down on yourself or harsh on yourself if you get depressed and your work is crap for a week. That's just a week. Like, over the course of the year, just try again, just pick yourself back up. I think if you can consistently get back on the horse and keep trying, that's probably the most important consistency you can have for success.
Yeah, no, totally. I totally agree with that. Now let's talk about the highs and lows. So you had them extremely when you was younger because of the amount of pain you went through, etc. But you're now much older now, and I take it.
Well, don't talk about how old I am. Come on.
Well, I'm not gonna go down that route. But yeah, you are older for sure. Very, mature.
I got a few gray hairs.
Well dressed.
Thank you.
But this ups and lows, like you have the depression. I take it you still go through those highs and lows. Are those highs and lows just a consistent issue from your younger days, or is it part built in with how life has hit you left, right, and center?
I'd say it's a combination. And if there's one lesson that I could give to young people today is this is backed up by science, is that I wish I knew that my depression or my tendency to get depressed, I wish I really understood how that was tied to my physical inflammation. We know now that depression has a physical, biological trigger for most people. You can't say for everybody, but when I was growing up, it was considered a psychological issue. And science, I don't know if you've looked this up, but Google it sometimes. Science has done a complete 180 on this. It's actually one of the most revolutionary things. Anxiety and depression might be more of a physical ailment, the result of like inflammation, and like it could be treated with diet and exercise and things like that. We've long known that exercise affected depression, but we didn't really know. People thought, oh, it's endorphins from exercise. Well, it might have to do with the cellular level and inflammation, and just it's really fascinating if you ever want to go on a deep dive on that. I wish I knew that my depression, wasn't my fault in a way that like still take responsibility for everything that you're dealing with. But I wish I didn't think that it was a psychological failing or a moral failing as much as I did. That made a cycle where I get more depressed. When I realized later on that it was the result of some physical traits, then I took very seriously. I have a very low inflammation diet. I have a routine. I meditate every morning. I have a bunch of things that I do to keep myself on track and not fall down that tendency, because I know that if I don't keep on that, then I'll have a tendency to gain weight, get depressed, have inflammation, have severe pain. That makes it easier to gain weight, easier to get depressed. There's this negative cycle that I have to be very aware of, because I'm different from other people. I can't just eat everything and do everything and expect no consequences. I like to say it that it's kind of like I got old quick. because we know being at this age, you can't just, eat a pizza and not have consequences, right? Your stomach or you maybe gain a few pounds, things like that.
For sure.
But when you're in your 20s, you can just eat a pizza without consequences. Well, it turns out, looking back, I had consequences. Like, my body really had inflammation when I had a high sugar diet, things like that. So anyways, the long story short is that, yes, I had terrible moments of inconsistency, and I wish that I had looked at that less from an ego perspective, like I have a failing that I have to overcome psychologically and try to talk myself out of it. I wish I would have looked more at my body and maybe consulted a few more experts and been a bit more humble to learn more. So if you're struggling with something, don't think that it's just your struggle, that it's just something you have to deal with, that, oh, you're just this way, you're just, I don't know, big boned or depressed or whatever you think is you. It might not be you. It might be a temporary challenge that you're dealing with, and be open to change, I think.
And finding a routine for yourself has helped you be in a position where you can manage the issues that you have within your life. It never goes perfect. Nothing is perfect, but with the experience you had with your own body and your psyche, you found a routine.
I will tell you, more than manage, you thrive. Like, I wake up every day, I have no pain, I have no aches. Now, every once in a while, like the seasons change, and I was like, oh, I'm achy for a week or something, right? And then my girl went up to me and she said, look, you're almost 50, man. I know 50-year-olds who can't get out of bed. Like, you know what I mean? I'm in great shape, but it's because, like, I figured my body out. But today I have the most amazing life because I had such a terrible life before. Because of the I focused on how to fix my body, and now I don't have pain. I can learn anything I want. I have investments. I can grow. I can be authentic with people. Yeah, and probably the best part of my routine actually is meditation. It's one of the consistent things I've gone back to, and the best parts of my life was when I started the day by meditating, and the worst parts of my life when I was just, things weren't working and I was having difficulty and I was struggling, was when I got out of the habit of meditation. So if anybody wants any from the Brain Hacker, that's the name of the book, Brain Hacker. From the Brain Hacker, the best brain hack, I think, is meditation. We spend so much time in our lives looking outside of ourselves for wisdom and knowledge, and it is the people, the few that sit down and look inside for wisdom, that have the world.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I mean, I'm a Buddhist myself, and there's a reason for that, because you look inside of ourselves, and the same meditation you're talking about with looking within yourself. And this is why I do the Buddhism. It keeps me on track.
These are actually my Furby.
Really? Look at that. Now I like you, Dave. Yeah. I like you very much.
What type of Buddhism do you practice? What sect?
Nichiren Daishonin, which is Japanese.
Oh, okay. I learned and studied Tibetan. When I was in Toronto, it has the largest Tibetan population outside of Dharamsala, India, and Tibet. Made good friends with a lot of the monks, and that, yeah, I was going into Buddhism and meditation to try to overcome my ADD, and I learned a lot. I wouldn't say I'm a practicing Buddhist anymore, but I still practice the techniques, but I'm just more of a mixed faith personally. But yeah, the meditate with beads, focus your mind once a day, and the world's your oyster, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It helps me with my mood for sure. Okay, moving on to your business. So you help people with PR side of things. You already described exactly that you was helping people to try and do it themselves. You're trying to coach them, but you didn't have the patience to do that, and you ended up, doing the work for them. So you thought,
that's the thing. I think I'm very good at a lot of things, and I don't think I make a very good coach because I just don't have the patience that they won't do what I wanted them to do, or at least the way I wanted them to do it. So I was like, just fine, I'll just do it. I think I coached for all of like 2 weeks, you know, like teaching them how to do stuff. So then I would just get on the phone, or I would just, you know, do a press release, or I would do something, and I booked them on some shows, and they were like, how do you do that? And I'm like, I'm just going to teach somebody and hire them. And I had a couple of people who worked for me that actually 2 of them were interns. And so I just brought them on as staff members, and went up to my entrepreneur friends and said, hey, you know, pay me a monthly retainer, and I'll get you famous. And it turned out to be very effective. Now we do PR on retainer for authors, experts, speakers, for the most part, and also some businesses, some big businesses even. And it's a wonderful business, because every day is kind of different. We get a different angle and a different attack on PR. We focus on organic PR. We're data driven, so we use data and trends to pitch our clients. So we'll tap into what's going on in the trendverse, and then pitch our clients. And it's, I think we're the most affordable, effective option, especially for that author expert class. If somebody or some company wants to be known as an expert in an area, we've really cracked the code on how to get the media to agree.
Wow. So how long have you had this business running, helping people?
It's been about 10, 11 years now, actually.
That's been a long time. And just give me a story of something quite amazing where your client thought it could never be done, and it made him wow within 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, so
you don't give him his name, just give me a for instance.
So we do get a bunch of clients that are speakers and authors, things like that, and sometimes they're a bit gray, they're a bit beige, like they're just kind of, they're good at this skill set, but it's really hard to figure out what sets them apart, right? So what we'll do is sit down with them and say, you know, and really ask, and I read all their material. I'm a speed reader, so it helps. So I read everyone's books, and then I ask them questions about it and everything. And I dig a little deeper. So there was a couple times, there was one client who's a communications expert, and we were like, well, how can we really, you know, tie this into like current events and trends and stuff? And this was when millennials were having a lot of difficulty entering the workforce. This was you know, pre-COVID stuff. They were having a lot of difficulty getting promotions, things like that. So we came up with this pitch that they were talking about how to get the different generations to communicate better. And it was a huge hit. We got like, oh man, we got like Wall Street Journal and Business Insider and a whole bunch of media that was well beyond what the retainer was paying for. They got famous on so many different shows. And it was really because we were solving a real problem out there, which was if you want to know what the hook was, it was that the younger generation, when they're entering the workplace, they were afraid to speak up because they had all these student loans and everything. They were basically afraid of losing their jobs so much they weren't speaking up. So we called it FOSU, fear of speaking up. And it made like Forbes and Bloomberg, and it was like this big story. So that's a really good PR hook. Another one, actually, really good friend of mine, Greg Reed out of California. He is a motivational speaker, and he is like the quintessential motivational speaker. Like you close your eyes, you think he's Tony Robbins, right? But he wasn't really very well known outside of that little niche. So I read his books and looked in the materials and everything. And what we did was we decided to take a counterintuitive approach, because there's one chapter in his book where he interviews a bunch of very rich people, and all the rich people say they're billionaires, and they say, don't follow your dreams. That they know a whole bunch of people who've had a bunch of money and they lost it because they threw it down a hole to follow their dreams. So we said, hey, what if we did this pitch about a motivational speaker who's telling everybody to not follow their dreams? And it was kind of a hit. It was like, wait, motivational speaker sees the light and tells you to not follow your dreams. And he got like on the CW and like Business Insider and like, you know, television, radio, everything. It was this huge hit. So it's like things like that where we also look at what the Google trends are and follow that. But it's things like that, finding the trends like that. That's what did it for me. Like I was in the Guinness Book of Records, and a fantastic credential. I thought I could just get on TV and then sell some courses, right? Because it's, you know, free advertising. And they were not interested after my Guinness record. It was crickets. So I decided to look up every possible tie-in I could to memory, like when kids are going back to school, or somebody, you know, some celebrity forgets something, that sort of thing. And then I would tie myself into the story and say, hey, as the memory guy, I could comment on this, you know, this story about Alzheimer's on the rise, or, you know, and that's how I got on 2000 shows. That's how I got in the New York Times. I was doing a tie-in with Sony Corporation in a speed reading event, and you know, things like that. So when people see the appearances on Steve Harvey or Dr. Oz or something like that, they think, oh, you know, you're just famous or something. But it was that tie-in, that finding out what are they interested in, and honestly, that's been kind of an obsession. It's kind of fun to figure this out, to figure out what is the media looking for, and then to give it to them. And then a client comes to us that it completely changes their business. You know, they're when you go from unknown to completely famous, it changes how everyone works with you and how everyone looks at you.
That's quite interesting. So let's ask about that. So you're very unique from that point of view with the trend. So how would you go about finding the trend, for instance? What would be your process for doing that?
Sure. And so the way I look at it is that PR is the ultimate kingmaker in business, at least. If somebody runs a business, or if they have a book, if I could get you on a major TV show or a podcast or something like that, then that's the only way that you can really get known and get the success that you deserve. And there's a tremendous amount of people who have great concepts and great ideas, and they're tremendously powerful experts, and they just don't have the media attention, so they're often overlooked. So a speaker that has really good PR can often command twice the fee that another speaker can. Harvard Business determined that if you have media logos, like as seen on, you know, Telemundo and as seen on this show, then you increase your conversions on your website by 48%. So there's real dollars and cents. There's real business. But how do you go about it? When I talk to a client, what we try to find is a demographic and a trend. That's basically our data analysis. So if we talk to somebody, find out what you're an expert in, and then what does that apply to? I might talk to an expert in business, and their primary demographic would be women. Let's say, you know, they were either very successful at having, you know, running a female-run company, being a woman CEO or something, and they wrote a book. We've had a few clients like that, right? So their demographic would be women, but then we look for the trends, and then we'll see, well, what is on the rise or on the fall? Post-COVID, incomes were way down for women. Mental health issues were way up during COVID, like things like that. So we find a demographic and a trend, and then essentially package a story for the media to do a conversation about that with our client. And it's a really powerful set of tools, but we have the data. So we go up to, because right now the media they are stressed, but they're more powerful than ever. Like don't believe what people say about how new media has destroyed traditional media. The New York Times is bigger than it ever was. And I don't just mean like with reach. I mean, they're making more money when you adjust for inflation than they ever did when everybody was reading a newspaper. And think, how is that possible? Well, it's because the traditional media is the source for credibility. And how important is credibility nowadays, right? Like, you can pick up the news, you can absorb content anywhere, and half of it's a deep fake, and some of it's going to be made by AI pretty soon, right? So when you have a business journal like the Wall Street Journal or something, and you're a stockbroker, well, that is sacred. That is very powerful information. It becomes more and more powerful than it ever was. It's not just disseminating information. So it's the same with speakers and authors. If I can get an author into a publication, then their credibility goes through the roof. But the other side of the media is that they are under a lot of stress and pressure. They're doing one person is doing the job of what three people used to do. So that's why at my firm, we are basically creating a bit more of the story. We're doing some of the journalist's job for them. We're coming up with data, information, giving it to them, making it very easy for them to do further research, and it's all verified. We show our sources and everything. I don't believe in spin, in not in the sense that a lot of people think about spin. I definitely believe in putting your best foot forward. Don't get me wrong, but everything that we pitch is 100% true and accurate, and also very interesting, and something that people should be paying attention to, in my opinion, and they're not. So when you go up to a journalist who's stressed out, has deadlines, has to make content, has to get clicks on the internet, and you say, hey, I have this amazing guest, I have a bunch of data that shows there's a real story, we've written part of the story already, these are the basic building blocks, just interview my guest and you can have some great content that people will click on. I mean, as a podcaster yourself, does that sound tempting?
Very. You've got me biting at the bit right now, to be honest, Dave.
There you go. I'll tell you about some of our clients later on afterwards. Yeah,
no, definitely.
So if you want to succeed in business today, try to think of, like, how can you do a little bit, how can you make your other people's jobs a little bit easier, and how can you do a little bit better job yourself? Maybe PR it gets into the journalism game a little bit, where we do a little bit of the research and journalism to kick the tires a little bit to find the story, because we're incentivized to get our clients on the air. So if we find a good story, that'll get our clients work. You would never think of that, 10 years ago, you would never think of a PR person doing that. It's amazing how things change.
Especially with technology, that makes things a bit easier to get data from the world that we're in right now. We're about to sum up, Dave. So what I'm going to ask you, what one thing, if you could advise the listeners for them to be successful in life, what one thing could you say to them to help them forge forward?
I don't know if what I will say will be taken seriously in the way that it should be, but when you get older, I think one of the biggest regrets you have is spending time with the wrong people. I think that we look to everybody else, we look to so many other people for validation, right? And if I look back, that never really got me anywhere. It's when I felt strongly about something and I was willing to put my own effort on the line and learn from my mistakes that I got somewhere. But trying to do it for other people, for their validation, it's a losing game, right? So don't look at other people and want what they have. Look at yourself and want what you're going to have.
And if you had to look at the right type of people, now remember, every person will have a different type of person around them. But to sum up, what qualities do the people have to have around you to go forward?
I think courage is the most underrated, most important quality you can have, because life is tough. Life will hit you hard. Maybe some people harder than others. It's hard to compare pain, but I was hit pretty hard. And courage is what separates people. The people who do something from the people who don't when they get hit, when they get knocked down. It really is. And it's the courage to tell the truth, even if it's not in your best interest too. It's the courage to be honest with yourself and not lie to yourself. It's the courage to try something you haven't tried before, to date somebody you haven't dated, to whatever it is, and it's the courage to speak up. We used to have in the field of ethics in academia, we talk about ethics. I became really fascinated when I did a deep dive into ethics, and there's all sorts of theories, the trolley problem, do the ends justify the means, and things like that. But I think what we lost from the ancient Greeks was one of the greatest things that they talked about when it came to Greek ethics was virtues. And in order for somebody to be a good person, they had to be brave. And I think that is so important today. There's nothing more dangerous and less impressive than an entitled coward. You know, be brave and go after whatever it is you think is right for you, with courage, and try it, and don't be afraid. And if I could go back in time, I would embrace that even more. And what little I did embrace that has helped me.
You're totally right. It takes a lot of courage to be yourself, to admit to who you are, and then take the courage to make the changes that need to be made when you're not happy with yourself. And you're totally right. Courage comes into it a massive way, especially when you feel like you have to conform when you know you shouldn't. That takes a lot of courage.
What if you have a boss, right? And you want to tell them the truth, right? They're doing something stupid and they're being an idiot, and you see it and they don't, right? If you're the person that can politely, obviously, and with class, point that out in an effort to try to make them better, then that boss will either turn on you if they're petty and a tyrant, and fire you, which is probably the best thing for you, because that's not the type of boss you want to have. Or they'll say, "Oh my God, I didn't see that and you did. I'm going to keep you close, and I'm going to listen to your counsel." And either way, you're better off. But it takes a whole hell of a lot of courage to jump into that pit, rather than just keep your mouth shut. How many people in history have kept their mouth shut in front of so many things happening? And it is the ones that have the courage to speak up, that you could be willing to put in the courage to deal with temporary pain to get some sort of long-term something, because it's the right thing to do, and the courage to do the right thing, whether or not it serves you, or at least seems to serve you in that moment. I think that's the best strategy. If you're going to be completely selfish, that's the best strategy going forward. Be honest and be truthful to people, whether or not it's good for you, whether or not, if you can get away with lying this time and you'll succeed, well, long term, that strategy is really harmful, because people won't trust you, right? So have the courage to be honest with yourself, to be vulnerable. Like I said, I made more money than ever when I started talking about being ADD and then getting in the Guinness Book of Records. In hindsight, it makes sense. All these parents who have ADD kids, they're like, "Well, I want to know your secret," and they bought my course, and that was very, very good for me. But at the time, I was just ashamed, and it's when I had the courage to speak up and say, "No, I shouldn't be ashamed of this. This might help people." That at the time, I thought that would hurt me. At the time, that's the employee going to their boss, pointing out a flaw, that sort of thing. But long term, it's that is the secret to success. And it's the person who sits back and just hopes something changes, that things aren't going to change unless you speak up.
And how beautifully said, Dave. And listeners, if you need someone for PR, you can see why he's the guy. The reason why he's the guy, he's resilient to make sure you're successful. Why? Because you can see this is part of his character. He's had to be resilient. He's had to be successful. And he carries that same success not only in his life, but in his clients' lives. And this is why looking into a person's backstory and seeing how difficult their life is leads them to success. And even though you're going through so much pain and difficulty yourself, remember there's a reason for that pain and difficulty. So you can be successful just like Dave and all the others that be on the show, as well as seeing how Dave helps his clients resiliently to be successful. So if you're interested in any PR, any advice like that, Dave is your man, as he's already shown. He's genuine, he knows what he's doing, and he's the man for you if he resonates. Do not hesitate to contact him. And with that said, Dave, how do they contact you?
Oh, well, thank you for those kind words. You can just Google Farrow, Farrow communications. We got a little mnemonic here. So see the F with the arrow?
See it.
F arrow or F arrow, Farrow. I thought that was clever. It's Farrow Communications. You can actually book a consultation on our site with me or one of our PR experts. And Farrow Memory. is for the memory programs. But if you really want to find out more, and this, you like this story, then go pick up Brain Hacker on Amazon.
And I will be doing that myself. I'll be doing that tonight. Because God knows I need it. I've got a brain like a fish. Or I should say a memory like a fish.
We've all been there.
So, definitely. I'll be picking up the book, Dave, for sure. You see that, listeners? Even I will take on the advice of some of the people that come on here, because their resilience, I need some of that. If I can just have a few days of what they've gone through just by reading and getting that experience, then improving myself, it would make sense for you to be able to pick up the book if you have a memory problem and just see if it could help you, just for the sake of a few dollars. Would that not be worth it?
Well, actually, I wanted to go beyond memory into brain hacks in general, how to hack the brain to have a better life. I think so. Brain Hacker, we have 55 different hacks, but it's everything from handling cravings and sticking to your diet to sleeping better. I hope I'm going to be coming up with some more books soon and some courses. And my main philosophy that I'm going into, my next phase, is really, I think there's a lot of people out there that are suffering because we're living a really unnatural existence. The brain, like when you think of something like ADD or something like that, or dyslexia, you think, oh, this is a deficiency. But, if you went back 100,000 years, would it be a deficiency, right? Or would the ADD people, would they be the hunters in the tribe that are willing to take risks and hyper-focus on prey and blocking out all the distractions because they're hyper-focused? And then that same sort of brain that's really good for hunting might not be so good for book learning later on, right? So, or dyslexia. Like the biggest thing I always say to people is, like, in reading, I love reading, but reading is a human invention, right? Let's not put it in the same category as walking and talking or anything. I don't think it's a disability. I think dyslexia is no more a disability than not being able to do a layup is a basketball deficiency. Like, it's a human invention. We invented this game, basketball. If you're bad at it, then there's just a spectrum of that. You can understand what you're doing and actually, use brain tricks to overcome some of these things too. But so many people take this to heart that there's something horribly wrong with them. When you go down to nature, there's nothing wrong with you. You are a product of nature, and it seems the farther we get away from the natural way that our brain really functions, with lights on all the time and screwing with our circadian rhythms and the 8-hour work day, sitting in a cubicle all the time. All these things are not natural for us. We get farther away from that, then we suffer. So that's what Brain Hacker is about, and that's what I think this next phase, what I'm going to try to help people with, is to be able to adapt to the modern world. We're not all going to go become Amish or anything, although I love my Amish friends. But we're going to adapt this wonderful brain we have to this new world by understanding what it needs and what its nature is, I think.
Well said. And with that said, Dave, thank you for using your precious time and being with us today. Thank you very much.
It's been a fun discussion. Thank you very much.
And in the meantime, everyone, we'll have another beautiful podcast very soon. And I will say sayonara.